Hi, thank you for joining us for our first edition of Strictly Sports Talk. My name is Chris Strick,
I'm Joshua Strick. And I'm Chris Strick.
and we are here to talk our favorite sport, football. We're going to go down some weekly updates and what's happened in this past week, and then we're going to review the AFC and NFC South, both free agency moves, draft moves, who we think is going to win, and some of our favorite fantasy football players on teams. So lock in. Joshua's going to kick us off.
So for the first note here, Jared Goff got a contract extension with the Detroit Lions.
I think that's huge, quite frankly. You've been seeing lots of contracts flying down for the Lions.
A lot of 4-year contracts.
A lot of 4-year contracts. They're trying to lock in their stars.
I think they're paying a lot for him though.
You know, I think it's going to be a remain to see. Like, we've got to look and see what Goff can do. Obviously,
It's worth it.
think it's worth it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's worth it. I think it's a little too much, including after 1 year. That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see what can happen. We obviously know Goff came over from the Rams, wasn't tremendously successful there, but fresh starts can always lead to new things. He did have an arm injury with the Rams, but we'll see what happens in Detroit. And you know, I think overall they are a hot team trying to build on the success from last year. What else do we got?
Well, the Titans signed Tyler Boyd from the Cincinnati Bengals. And they also got Calvin Ridley.
Not a receiver upgrade there.
They did, I think. They got
A lot more depth.
They re-signed Westbrook
like-
also.
Yeah, a lot of depth.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd's an interesting sign. I mean, I think ideally speaking, he's trying to build on a career that, you know, is a decent career, but he's had some injury issues, and I think it's a remain to see for me on if he can stay healthy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
it's good though.
He's a talented receiver. It's a talented receiver. I think if you hadn't had so many injury issues, we'd be telling a different story in this. But we'll see if he can stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, I think he can help Tennessee along with some of the other moves they've made. They are in a tough AFC South conference that is tremendously competitive, and we'll discuss that in a little bit.
Well, next on the list we have the Bills signed Scantling from the Chiefs.
That is an interesting move for me.
Very interesting.
What are you thinking, Christian?
I don't quite exactly like love it. But I don't know, like
It's not terrible.
I don't know if Valdez Scantling's even as good as Tyler Boyd, but
I mean, I think when we're looking at the Bills, we're looking at a team that
got
lost
a lot of guys.
Gabe Davis, lost Diggs, and traded
They
Diggs
did.
away. So I think ideally speaking, there are a lot of targets to go around in Buffalo. Obviously from a talent perspective, I don't know if Valdez Scantling is as good as Diggs. He is a speed receiver, so he's kind of reminds me a little bit of Gabe Davis. I think it'll be interesting to see what he does there. Scanling's had some drop issues over his career, so
Yeah.
but there are tons of targets, and he can get downfield. So we'll see how Buffalo does this year, given the turnover in offense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next we have the Dolphins signed Odell Beckham Jr.
That's huge.
You think that's huge?
Yeah, I think it's crazy.
He's
for them.
good.
I know. Like it's a good sign. Good third receiver.
Alright.
One
Guy who will receive some
Tyreek
targets.
Hill and pretty much then just another.
And add to the receiver core, giving them some depth that they
They don't have that
have.
much receiver depth in that, in my opinion. I don't think they have much receiver
They
depth.
kind of drop.
I think that was a good sign for them.
Waddle.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, Odell Beckham has definitely been a talented receiver over his career. I think again, injury issues. He definitely doesn't have to worry about being the number one. I mean, when you're looking at it, he's really going to be the number 3 guy there, and so
Yeah.
as a number 3 guy, I think there's definitely strong upside. It gives them some decent depth. Also a team that has had some injury issues and getting a little up there in age. Tyreek think he's 32 this year, and
Well,
yeah,
kind
it'll
of
be-
getting off his contract soon, I think.
it'll be interesting to see what Miami can do. I know there's a lot of
People that-
opportunity there in the AFC North, or
Miami's
East,
good.
I should say AFC East.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I think
I think
they'll have a
they'll
better
be
shot
okay.
this year than
Yeah.
they
That's
had
a,
last year.
that's a division that can be conquered. So,
Yes.
any other news for the week?
No, not really.
All right, well then let's dive in. We're gonna hit up the AFC South and start off with the Tennessee Titans. We've got a new era with Derrick Henry leaving, going to Baltimore. Titans are in kind of a rebuild mode. They've got a young quarterback with Will Levis. Finished last in the division last year.
Yeah. They were not great.
They had locked up Morgan Cox to an extension on a resign, Nick Folk, Nick Westbrook, Akeem. So not a huge splash in terms of re-signing. They didn't have a lot of people moving on outside of Derrick Henry.
Westbrook
Yeah,
was a
they
good.
made a lot of
Morgan
moves
Cox
for
and
signing people.
Westbrook were, I think, both really good with signs.
They've signed a lot of guys.
I mean,
that
they,
help
it's
out.
just to continue their receiver depth probably.
Yeah, I think ideally they did make some splashes. They brought in Tony Pollard to replace Derrick Henry. And
That's not terrible.
he's gonna pair with Tyjae Spears in the backfield. I think they're both kind of comparable in terms of the types of backs they are. Pollard might be a little bit bigger in size. They don't really have that ground and pound that Derrick Henry was, and so I think ideally speaking, it's gonna be interesting to see the offensive scheme and how they're gonna change that up.
My favorite signing was probably Calvin Ridley.
They did lock up Calvin Ridley, coming back last year with the Jaguars, so kind of trading from one team in the AFC South to another. Calvin Ridley will kind of pair up
Hopkins. I think.
with Hopkins.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
That's
see how they can produce
That's gonna be
again.
good.
I still thought Hopkins was actually, I don't know. For some reason.
They got Lloyd Cushberry at center,
I don't know. that
Chidobe
much.
Awuzie, Kenneth Murray. They brought over Mason Rudolph, who will back up Levis more than likely, and of course, we talked about Tyler Boyd. Sort of interesting if he can stay healthy. I think they did a decent job of bringing in some veteran weapons for Will Levis to
Yeah.
help a young quarterback.
I like how they got their better linemen. I think that's
Yeah,
what they were
because they
struggling with last year.
With linemen as
They
well.
didn't, I don't think, have that much strength at the linemen.
Yeah.
And these new
Okay.
signings might help them, especially since they got JC Latham in the draft.
Yep, and we'll
Yeah.
dive into that draft now. I like them. That was a good
Definitely.
pick in the draft.
I think that was like one of the best picks from. Not
Okay.
really the
Sure,
first
their
one,
best
but-
pick.
Yeah,
I think building in the line is going to be good. They got Devondre Sweat from Texas in round 2, Cedric Gay, linebacker from North Carolina in round 4, and then really just kind of built on depth. I think overall,
they
I
got
don't
another receiver in the draft.
I don't think it was a horrible draft. I'm not in love with their draft. I'll probably grade it out as a C. What do you think?
I graded it out as a B. I think they drafted well, especially the first 3 picks that they drafted.
What do you think, Christian?
And I like
Yeah,
how
I
they're
would say the
actually-
same.
I think I like
for
how
sure.
they're actually getting a
Wasn't
lot with receiver depth,
wonderful, but it was
especially since they might not have so they're going to lose Westbrook in a year, and if they can't get a receiver, so I think Jahan Jackson might be a good pick, especially if someone gets injured.
Yeah, he said depth pick out of Tulane.
Yeah.
I would have
Yeah.
liked to have seen them make a little bit more of a move in earlier rounds to try to build up some of the younger talent. I think that's probably why I grade them a little bit lower in that C status.
Yeah, definitely.
I think they've got Calvin Ridley, who suffered from some drops, wasn't as consistent, I think, as Jacksonville wanted him to be, and probably why they let him go. Tyler Boyd, again, has had some health concerns, but I think overall the Titans
Yeah.
are waiting to see if some of their younger talent and Traylon Burks, maybe he can emerge. Again, we talked about Nicholas Brook-Akin and see if he can be a good role player.
Yeah, he had a
But-
rocky season.
I think ideally speaking, I don't know if the Titans did enough to really compete in the AFC South, given the other teams. So let's
Yeah.
talk about some of those teams and flip over to the
Jaguars.
Jaguars.
Yeah.
I think honestly, the Jaguars, amongst everything, have had the most pressure on them ever since drafting Trevor Lawrence. They've kind of been on the radar to take over that division.
They've been doing well though.
Yeah, they have. They were pretty good last year.
Yeah, they did well last year. I think,
That one game is what decided it.
ideally, they've got some maybe cleanup work to do, in my opinion. I think they've
Oh, yeah.
struggled with some drops. I think Trevor Lawrence, be it through himself or through mishaps in the offense, they had a lot of turnovers at the tail end of last year, and so there's some timing concerns. I think Trevor Lawrence, still think is a fine quarterback. I think blocking and protection is part of it.
Oh, yeah.
I think one thing that's really gonna help them is them locking in Josh Allen.
I think Josh Allen was big, and I will say, like, as far as signings go, the Jaguars made a lot of moves in the offseason. They locked in Josh Allen,
They locked in.
They got
Signed.
Jones.
signed Caleb Johnson,
I don't know.
signed Dearness Johnson.
Know if I like the
Gabe
Matt
Davis and
Jones
Eric
pick that
Armstead.
much. I mean, he's good for
Both pretty
quarterback
good.
depth,
Will
but
Harbaugh.
I don't think he's that good. Or it could have been he just didn't have much of a team around in New England. I'm interested to see how that does.
Yeah, that was an
Or
interesting.
if Trevor Lawrence gets hurt or like in the preseason, how he gets it
Thing
done.
there with Matt Jones.
I think bringing over Mac Jones as a backup is,
See how he plays. Really. It's an interesting move.
they brought over some veteran talent. They got Eric Armstead from the 49ers, obviously a fan. So I think Eric Armstead is gonna be interesting for the Jaguars in terms of locking in that D line. They brought in Mitch Morse as a center from Buffalo to kind of improve that offensive line. They got Ronald Darby, who in my opinion is a great cornerback from the Ravens. Can play on the outside, can also play on the inside in that slot spot. Devin Duvernay also coming over from Baltimore, great special teams man. Signed Josiah Tegura from Green Bay. He's a tight end that came out of Cincinnati, good hands, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do. Obviously, we know they've got a tight end in Jacksonville already, but
Yeah.
just adding that second tight end who can catch, always a good thing in my opinion. Travis Gibson, Darnell Savage, another good signing from Green Bay. He started 69 out of 72 games in the last 5 seasons, so he's been pretty consistent in Green Bay. And I think ideally speaking, he's gonna kind of build up that defensive backfield. I mean, from a free agent standpoint, I like a lot of what they did. I think Gabe Davis was interesting. I'm not quite sure. With Christian Kirk already there, kind of as that deep threat, if they planning to play Gabe Davis in the slot or what they're going to do.
Same thing for me.
I think they needed more of a possession receiver, in my opinion. I don't know if Kirk or Davis really fills that role.
They got one.
They did get Brian Thomas, so let's talk in that drafts. Again, from my standpoint, I grade the Jaguars draft at a C range. And we'll get into why. What do you got, Joshua?
I got B minus. I think Brian Thomas wasn't a bad pick. And also, I think if they have Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas and they move Gabe Davis down to receiver 3, they might have really good starting receivers.
Interesting. How'd you grade them out?
And I think they got some good
there were
defensive
some
players
picks here and
that will
there.
help them.
That I liked, but then there were some picks that I don't think they exactly need. But one of them I don't think they needed was Brian Thomas Jr. I think they could have gotten a little bit more of stuff there.
I'm with
Other than a
you.
Receiver.
I mean-
That's what really threw me off the first pick.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think ideally speaking, and they kind of did draft a lot of defense, but I would have liked to have seen, because I feel like Jaguars struggled on the defensive side of the ball. Granted, they brought in Ronald Darby, they brought in Eric Armstead, they brought in Darnell Savage, to kind of bolster that defense. But I think ideally speaking, I would have loved to have seen them go defense in round one, because I feel like that was a bigger need. Obviously they got Mason Smith from LSU. They got Darian Jones at DB.
Yeah.
They
did a good job.
I think they did pretty well still drafting.
They did all right.
defense at
Some of
the
them
second, third round.
Yeah, some of them
I
wasn't
don't think
great.
they might
Some
have
of
been
them were really good.
terrible. I think they drafted pretty well.
Yeah, I'll take C range still for sure for me as well.
I think it'll be interesting to see how they can compete. Obviously, we know that the team to catch up on is the Texans, who we'll talk about in a little bit. They won the AFC South, and I'm just not sure, in my opinion, Jacksonville did enough.
So
Again, I would love to have seen them go defense, build up that defense a little bit more. I think they gave up the 7th most yards per game on the defensive side from passing. And so I don't know if just Darnell Savage and Jarian Jones, DeAndre Prince were enough for me in that standpoint, when they're going to have to guard some of the receivers they have to guard in this season. But we'll move on now to our Indianapolis Colts. They were on the playoff berth, even with an injured Anthony Richardson. We know there's a lot of talent. Anthony Richardson is coming back off an injury plague
Yeah.
year.
hopefully he'll play well. We'll see how that
He
works
does
out.
have a lot of injury issues though.
That's why I like the signing of Joe Flacco.
And they still
as well,
didn't do
for a
terrible
backup
without
position for
Richardson.
Anthony Richardson, just in case.
Yeah, I think
Something else does happen.
Awesome.
Joe Flacco did kind of prove that he might still be able to play in the league last year. We gotta be impressed with what he was doing in the Browns.
I think I like how they re-signed Michael Pittman, because I feel that's one thing that they might be struggling with, because that's like the only big receiver they have on the team. And then they have Josh Downs.
Yeah, they got Pittman back. They do have Downs.
And they
We'll
got-
talk about the draft here in a little bit. They locked in some good defense, important defense for them with Zaire Franklin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Kenny Moore on the defensive side in the secondary. Tyquan Lewis, I think, was a good signing. Grover Stewart, another good re-sign. And then they had some smaller re-signings from a draft. I think they made a great splash, at least from my
I
perspective.
think they did really well, especially by resigning all those defensive players.
Sure, they got a lot of guys
Yeah.
that they.
How do you think they did in the draft, Christian?
I would say an A. I would say an A. They did great with those first 2 picks, and yeah, that's what really got me.
What about you,
Well,
Josh?
I give them an A- because I liked how they drafted Latu and Adonai Mitchell, and I also like how they got some good I like how they got the lineman, and I think also Anthony Gold was another good pick to give them more depth in receivers.
I
I'm gonna switch it real quick.
I
A
gave-
plus.
think Josh was pulling it out to an A plus.
Okay.
I think it was an A minus too. I mean, from my perspective, the Colts were a team that doesn't have any real big glaring needs. They were able to address some top talent, in my opinion. They got the 2 in the first round from UCLA on the defensive end side. You can always use pass rush. You're gonna have to pressure Stroud to really make a splash there in the AFC South. To me, Adonai Mitchell, obviously we know he had some off the field issues. I think without those, he would have been a first round pick. And so if we can get that corrected, I think really Adonai Mitchell from Texas was the steal in round 2.
For sure.
They were able to really just add depth, in my opinion, throughout the rest of the draft, both on the offensive line, which as a 49er fan, I think you went in the trenches. And so offensive line, defensive line, pass protection, run blocking, always important. Colts have Jonathan Taylor, who we know is a great running back. If he can stay healthy as well, you know, he had some health concerns. But overall, I think really the Colts are going to go as far as Richardson and Jonathan Taylor can take them.
Jonathan
Right.
Taylor's a good partner. I think they also got a good backup quarterback for the first team.
Right.
By getting one.
And now let's talk about the team to beat in the AFC South. We got the Houston Texans under D'Amico Ryans and Stroud in year one. Obviously, they were able to win the AFC South.
They did well.
They are not going to surprise anybody this year. They are obviously the team to beat and on everybody's radar. And I think they made huge splashes in the offseason, quite frankly, both on the offensive side and defensive side of the ball. So what do you think about some of their defensive or their free agent moves, Christian?
I love them a lot. I mean, the signing of Hunter, the acquiring of Joe Mixon, and the trading of Stephon Diggs. I think they did a really good job at surrounding Stroud and building a good defense.
My favorite thing they probably did was by getting Joe Mixon, because I feel they didn't have that good of a running back, and I think Joe Mixon's really gonna help them.
For sure, yeah.
Because at first they had Damian Pierce and he got injured, and then Singletary became the starter, and he still was averaging the best, and I think Mixon's really gonna help them with that.
Yeah, I think Joe Mixon gives them an interesting improvement in the running back side of things. I think Singletary surprised a lot of people last year when he came in for Pierce. Obviously, we know they re-signed Dalton Schultz, who looked rejuvenated last year for the Texans. Fairbairn, who is probably one of the best kickers in the league. They re-signed Chris Boyd, Eric Murray, Desmond King, Khalil Davis, Noah Brown, Charlie Heck. So they did a good job of bringing back in people who were leaving, even if it was 1-year deals. From an overall free agency standpoint, they brought in Daniel Hunter. I think that was a huge signing. They brought in Danico Autry again. I think that was a huge signing. Aziz Al-Shahir, and again, I think really good run defender. You put him behind that defensive line of Will Anderson, Danico Autry, and Daniel Hunter, and I think really they've got really a dominant force. You look at D'Amico Ryans, who is ex-49er again. I love it. Building in really that defense that is comparable, I think, to the 49ers and bringing in top talent. And then again, on the offensive side, Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs in that trade from Buffalo. I think, ideally speaking, they took huge moves upward. And I look at that receiving core, Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. I mean, on the lower side, they got Mechie, Robert Woods, Noah Brown, Ben Skoranek. I mean, they've got depth at receiver.
For sure, yeah.
And they've got a lot of mouths to feed too. So it'll be interesting to see how Stroud can pass the ball around when you're looking at Diggs, Collins, and Dell from 1 through 3. That's quite a bit of mouths to feed on the offensive side. But the Texans.
It's not like you have to pass them because they're not on them when you're playing.
Texans do pass a lot, so we'll see how that goes. On the draft side, Christian, where do you got them?
Yeah, I think it's fine. They acquired depth and positions they need to fill. I liked Blake Fisher for the lineman position. Yeah, overall, it's fine. I like it.
I gave them a B. I like how they got Kamari last year from Georgia, and especially Blake Fisher. And I like how they also got some defense in the draft. And I think also, I mean, I think they drafted pretty well overall. I like how they also got Jordan I think it's gonna help him in the running back, maybe get some more depth in the running back. So yeah, I give him a B.
All right, I gave him a B plus. Again, not a lot of need really from what they brought in on the free agency side. I think ideally speaking, they drafted Kamari Lassiter from Georgia. I think that was probably their biggest need pick, with Steven Nelson leaving.
Stover,
Um,
Stroud.
Blake Fisher was definitely kind of a depth aspect on the offensive tackle side. Could be interesting to see if he can compete for a starting job. And Kalen Bullock, again, drafted for depth on the defensive backside. Might compete with Jalen Petrie, who I think kind of had a down year last year. In the fourth round, I thought it was an interesting pick of Cade Stover. Joshua just mentioned it a second ago. They got Dalton Schultz. He's getting up there in age. They got Jordan or Brevin Jordan, who's on his last year. Cade Stover, another Ohio State alum. So coming out and playing with Stroud, they've obviously got some familiarity from Ohio State. So if Dalton Schultz, even though he signed a 3-year deal, decides to hang it up and they don't want to bring back Reverend Jordan, they have someone who has that familiarity. So I think that was a good signing for them. I like that pick. I think they maybe could have gotten something different in round 4, but I can't blame them on that pick. And then, yeah, they just solidified the later rounds with depth. Again, I love what they did in free agency. The D-line, Daniel Hunter, Denny Glautry. Will understand that it's going to be a monster D-line potentially. And from being the AFC South champs last year, I don't really think there's a threat, quite frankly, in my opinion, out there. I think it's theirs to lose.
Repeat what they did last year, if not even better.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. You think they're an AFC conference championship contender?
For sure, yeah, I think so.
What about you, Joshua?
Oh, what?
You think the Texans can compete for the AFC South or AFC conference championship?
Honestly, I think they could compete for a Super Bowl.
You think they're potentially Super Bowl champs, huh? All right, we'll see. So let's hop over now. We're talking the other conference, sticking with the South, and we'll start with the Panthers. You got Bryce Young. Obviously, there was some interesting decisions last year between Bryce Young and Stroud. Obviously, they're always going to have that comparison now.
Well, actually, by getting all these players that they signed.
Yeah,
Especially signing the lineman, I think that's really gonna help them. I feel that's something they've been struggling with for a while.
And weapons for the offense as well, and Dante Johnson.
Yeah, I like the trade with Dante Johnson.
Then giving Brian Burns one more year in Carolina's gonna help the defensive side.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be interesting. All those are two. They did bring in Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt on some nice contracts to solidify the inside of that offensive line. And when you're looking at smaller quarterbacks, which Bryce Young kind of qualifies, he is definitely a smaller quarterback in the league, both height and size. He's not a guy that's going to grow anymore, and he's not going to really beef up. So adding that interior offensive guard standpoint to me is key. Again, they didn't have a tremendous amount of talent around him on the offensive side. I mean, I think last year we were really just looking at Adam Thielen, who came out of nowhere in the fantasy side of the ball, was probably Bryce Young's favorite target in a sense. But
he was exploding.
like Christian said, they brought in Deontay Johnson, who I think is going to be another good, talented receiver in trade.
So a lot of moves as well.
They did beef up their defensive line too. They franchise tagged Brian Burns, signed
And they also
Sean Robinson, signed DJ Wenham.
I like how they also got in Smith-Marset, because I feel they need some more depth in the receiver core.
Yeah, I mean he was definitely an interesting, just kind of like re-signed on their side. It'll be interesting to see. I think on the receiver side, they did good in the draft. What do you think? How do you think they did in the draft?
I gave him a C plus. I like how they got Xavier Leggett. I think it's gonna help him in the receiver part. I don't feel they needed to get Jonathan Brooks in the second round. I feel they could have gone something better than Jonathan Brooks. Because also they already have, I feel, a pretty good running back with Trevor Hubbard. And really other than that, I do like how they got Trevor and Wallace, but all the other players, I don't know much about.
Yeah. Quarterback.
I give him a C plus.
I love it. They filled a ton of offensive positions. I love the drafting of Xavier Leggett. I think he'll be a number 2 receiver there in Carolina, as well as Jonathan Brooks will probably be, if not the starting running back for Carolina. I think he will do awesome playing behind that new line that they have added to, as well as signing probably the starter tight end there for them. And
Yeah.
Tavion Dennis. I gave it A- overall. I think it was pretty good.
I think I'm on the same page as you. I don't know if it quite say A-. I gave him a B+ overall. I think they did a good job of surrounding Young with some talent. Both in the free agency and in draft. I think they acquired some key pieces for a young team that's really still building. Late in the draft, I think they focused on defense, which would be key for them. I do like Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina. I think he could be a tremendous talent there in Carolina. I'd like Jonathan Brooks as well. I think there will be a tandem committee in Carolina and between Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks. I like that. I also like the Jatavian Sanders pick in round 4. To me, that's a good receiver with good hands. I think ideally speaking, they'll need to improve some route running to get separation, but strong hands, good speed. Think he can definitely compete for that starting tight end spot. Overall, I don't think the Panthers are going to compete this year. I think they're still building, but ideally speaking, I think they did a pretty good job in building and adding talent.
The record will definitely be better.
Yes, their weapon might be a bit better.
In that South Conference, because of rankings and everything else, you have some of the easiest schedules in football, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out into overall schedules or wins, losses for the teams. Now we're gonna hop over to the Falcons, who made some interesting moves. I'm
Yeah, me too.
very excited to see what the Falcons can do.
Okay, I wanna
I
say
think
something.
more from a fantasy perspective, in my opinion, and
I do wanna say something. I do like how they trade for Wandale Moore, but I think they might have gotten too many receivers.
Yeah.
When they signed them, and I think also I like now Wayway McCloud's not terrible. He's good for kick returning returning. I don't know if they should have signed a Mooney. I feel they're also giving him a bit too much.
Well, we will see. What do you think, Christian? How do you think they did in the free
They
agency?
did a great job acquiring young talent, including Kirk Cousins as well as a starter premier quarterback there. And I think they'll be even better than they were last year with these signings.
Yeah, I think Kirk Cousins will be interesting. Obviously, we got a new head coach with Ray Morris, new offensive coordinator. They're going to implement a system similar to what Cousins ran in Minnesota, and so I think, ideally speaking, like it will be interesting to see what Cousins can do in this new offensive system. They have obviously Drake London and Pitts already there. They have Darnell Mooney, who I think was a good signing. I think Mooney was probably underutilized for the Bears. I think Kirk Cousins will be able to use him as a deep threat, complement to Drake London, who's more of the possession receiver. And
Yeah.
I think Rondell Moore in the slot really just kind of solidifies what I think is a good 1-2-3 punch from a receiver core. And then we know Cousins likes his tight ends, so Pitts is gonna be interesting there. He's honestly one of the people on my fantasy radar this year kind of emerging. I also do like Drake London this year. There's a lot of targets to go around, and Kirk Cousins is far more efficient. We've seen what he's done in Minnesota, and it'll be interesting to see what he does.
Yeah.
How do you grade their draft though, Christian?
Okay, I just give it a D. I don't like it at all. First of all, I don't like Michael Penix. They did not need a backup quarterback. I don't think they need to worry about the future right now, including after they just signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year deal. There's some other picks I don't think they exactly needed to get here in the draft. But yeah.
What do you think,
Well, I
Joshua?
give him a D plus. I don't really like the Michael Penix pick. I think that was a waste. I feel that they could have also, I feel they've been struggling with linemen and they didn't really get that much in the signing. So I think that they could have drafted a really good lineman, especially with the number 8 pick. So yeah, I give him a B plus.
All right, I gave him a C. I mean, I think ideally speaking, somewhat similar to what Christian and Joshua said. I'm not in love with Penix in the first round. I mean, obviously, I think we understand it. I think Kirk Cousins, if I remember correctly, one of the reasons he wanted out of Minnesota was because they had talked about drafting the future and replacement. And so, ideally speaking, you go to Atlanta, first rounds, they draft Penix. You got to wonder how that's going to impact. Ideally speaking, if Cousins comes out a little rocky, new offensive system, new players, are people going to be calling for Penix? From the Falcons standpoint, I understand needing to draft the future. Obviously, we also know that Kirk Cousins is coming off of an injury. He's had a couple injuries in his career, and so I think we've definitely there's a need to have a backup. I don't know if I love it in the first round. I think they could have waited a little bit later on and gotten
Maybe like the 3rd or 2nd.
a different
Maybe
quarterback. We had Spencer Rattler coming in later in the draft. We had Jordan Travis coming in later in the draft. There were other quarterbacks that I think could have been taken in later rounds. Like some of the rest of what they did, kind of solidifying D line and defense really in rounds 2 through 5 is huge. Obviously, needing to compete with New Orleans, with Tampa Bay, wanting to get improved defensive line. I think they needed more of a pass rush, and so I liked what they could have done. I think ideally speaking, that's what I would have wanted them to do in round 1 is solidify one of those defensive talents. But like I said, I love Cousins. He is a premier quarterback, very efficient. He has a ton of pieces around him right now, including Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, 2 very capable running backs. I think they will also kind of benefit from the signing of Cousins. It will be interesting to see with all the pieces around him what they can do. And like I said, right now, from a fantasy perspective, Kyle Pitts, you're on my radar. Cousins threw 27% of his passes last year to the tight end spot. So I think ideally speaking, what I've been wanting to see for years is more targets to Pitts. He is a talented tight end coming out of Florida, in my opinion, and has not really gotten the targets I think he should have. So we'll be interested to see what happens this year with the Falcons. I think they took some huge steps and people are expecting them to compete. They do have also the easiest schedule in the NFL, I believe it is. And all of their harder games look to be at home, which I think still benefits them. So we'll see what the Falcons can do this year. Moving on to the Saints. Moving on to the Saints. They got the second easiest schedule in the NFL, similar to where they were last year. And they had some struggles. They do have a new offensive coordinator, Kubiak, who I love. I think they're going to have some revamped offensive schemes, a little bit more run heavy, similar to kind of Kubiak runs a system similar to what they run for the Rams and 49ers. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Joshua, I will let you start. How do you like the free agency moves for the Saints?
I like how they got Tyrann Matthew and signed Chase Young, yeah. I also like how they re-signed Amadi and Jonathan Abram. I actually think that's gonna help us at the defense, so we don't have to worry too much about our defense. And then I also like how we actually got Stanley Morgan and Cedric Wilson Jr. I think it'll just help us in the receiver depth. I think that we really need. I also don't hate Nathan Peterman. We also drafted a quarterback though. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see. Christian, what do you think about free agency?
Quarterback
I
depth,
think
I
they
don't think
did
they're-
a pretty good job.
Depth.
I love Chase Young, including with Cam Jordan there in New Orleans. I love that they got a lot of defensive back people there, including with Tyrann Matthew, and as I said, lots of defensive backs there. Definitely helped them.
I mean, I think
Great job.
they did all right. I think I would have liked to have seen them make a little bit more of a splash on the free agency, really to kind of step up to compete, especially considering what Atlanta had done. I think locking in Tyrann Matthew is important. I think it can be interesting to see what Chase Young does. Another ex-49er. I think he was a little inconsistent. So it'll be interesting to see if he can reemerge into that top talent. Joshua, I'll let you kick off too with your draft. What are you thinking about the Saints draft?
I gave them an A+, not because of my favorite team. I think they drafted well. I like how we got Talise Fuaga and Kool-Aid McKinstry. And I also like how we got Spencer Rattler from South Carolina. I think it's gonna help us with the quarterback depth. And also like Bub means I think it'll help us a bit better with the receiver depth, as we did just cut Michael Thomas. He was a big player, but I feel we were paying him a lot to not really play because he was always injured. And then I like how we also just got some more defensive players at the 5th and 6th round, and how we got Josiah Azarum just for some offensive lineman depth. So yeah.
I mean, I think I graded the Saints out with an A. They had limited picks in day one, but I think ideally speaking, addressed, in my opinion, a pretty big need. Talise Fuaga on the offensive tackle side, and then Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think Fuaga on that offensive line is going to be key. You want someone obviously to be able to protect your quarterback. I think Derek Carr has been kind of questionable, but I do feel like some of that is just offensive line and getting protection. And so I think Fuaga will kind of be an anchor for them. He's very athletic, can move, will be pivotal in some of those run blocking schemes as well. That Kubiak will install, and so I really like the Fuaga pick. Kool-Aid McKinstry again, when you look at just the division that they're in with Tampa Bay, with Atlanta, you had Kool-Aid in with Matthew, Lattimore, Adebo. I think they've got some strong defensive backs that can provide coverage and compete in those leagues. Yeah, I think overall they did a pretty good job in the draft. What do you think, Christian?
I think the same thing, honestly. I mean, you guys kind of covered it all. I love the Talise Fuaga because they seriously needed linemen there in New Orleans, as well as some defensive backs and cornerback position like Kool-Aid McKinstry. They did not have much depth there, so I like that that draft pick there. But means probably gonna be, if not their second to third receiver, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
Probably third since we have Shaheed. I think.
Probably.
Do we have Shaheed?
You do have Shades.
Okay, other than that,
With like four.
same thing, kind of, I'll give him an A as well.
Alright. I mean, I think ideally speaking, it will be interesting to see what they can do. Alave obviously is going to be great. We know what he can do. Shaheed is going to be a good deep threat. Juwan Johnson, the Swiss Army knife, Taysom Hill, the Saints have some key pieces, good running backs. And I think they improved on the defensive side. Hopefully Chase Young will reemerge into the dominant player he once was. Now we'll move over to the person on my left and let's
His favorite team.
talk about Tampa Bay. Christian, you want to kick it off? How do you feel about Tampa Bay?
I think we did well. We re-signed a lot of our stars, bought back some of our stars as well. I love that we secured Antonio Winfield for a very long time now, as well as Baker and Evans.
New franchise.
To decently sized contracts. I also love how we bought back Whitehead in the safety position. I think it will be a great to see Jordan Whitehead and Antonio Winfield back at work in Tampa.
Yeah, they did initially franchise tag Antoine Winfield, but signed him this week to that extension. And so that will be big, locking him in. I like the Winfield keep, Greg Gaines, Avante David. Obviously they took care of Baker Mayfield after he had a good season for them. Brought back Mike Evans, brought back Jordan Whitehead and free agency signing. So, I think they did a good job of taking care of their own, bringing in Whitehead. Would have liked to have seen them do a little bit more, given what some of their competition had done. I think it will make for a more competitive league. I think like the Saints or division, I think like the Saints, Tampa Bay might have had some salary cap constraints working against them. But wish they could have done a little bit more on free agency. What do you think, Joshua?
So I think that I like how they got Antonio Winfield Jr. Finchers tagged him and we signed Mayfield and Evans. And I also like how they got Whitehead back. I feel when he went to Jets, I feel like he was a big loss for the Bucks. And now that they have him back, I feel he's gonna help the Bucks a lot on defense. And overall, the other stuff I also like how we signed Avante David. I feel he's a big part of the defense. So yeah.
What about the draft, Christian? How do you think Tampa did?
I think we got around a B. I mean, there were some picks I didn't exactly think we needed. I think there were some picks that we have added that are gonna fix the line a little bit, including with like Graham Barton at center. And then after losing Shaquille Barrett, we got Chris Braswell too at the edge position. I'm really excited to see what they're gonna do with Bucky Irving and Rashad White. But yeah, I think we did a pretty decent job. Some picks I didn't exactly love, but yeah, other than that, we did a great job. We're good to give them a B.
All right, I gave them a B plus. I kind of really loved what they did. Not huge standout, but I think ideally speaking, the Bucks needed to service some key weak points, and I feel like they did that in the first 3 rounds. Graham Barton, obviously in the center spot, is going to step in as their starting center. Chris Braswell from Alabama is going to add to that edge and pass rush. Tyke Smith is going to be good. I know obviously they have Jordan Whitehead and Antoine Winfield, but just adding depth to the defensive backfield. Jalen McMillan will add to depth at that receiver core. So ideally speaking, and even Bucky Irvin in the 4th round, obviously will add to a running back situation. I think give them kind of that 1-2 punch in Tampa Bay. But overall, yeah, I mean, I just think they were really good at making the most out of their positions in the drafts and addressing kind of the needs that they needed to. I think Tampa Bay is poised to defend the division in the South. It will be interesting to see what happens if the Saints can emerge, if Atlanta can emerge. It will be interesting to see. But thank you for joining us. Oh, that's right, Joshua, my bad. What do you think about Tampa Bay? What do you think of your competition?
I gave them an A- after changing my mind 2 times. At first I had the B-, the B, then A-. So I think Graham Barton was a good pick, especially Chris Blaswell. When I heard good stuff about Tyke Smith, I think that was a good pick. Also, I did love the Jalen McMillan pick also, and I think Bucky Irvin will help them with their running back depth. So yeah. Give him 8.
All right. Well, I mean, that does it for the South. Cleared that up. Thank you all for joining us for episode 1 of Strictly Sports Talk. Hope you liked it. If you like it, make sure you hit that subscribe and come back and see us again. Thank you so much.